She walked into the grand hall carrying a tray of drinks, trying not to notice the glittering chandeliers above her or the marble floors that reflected every step she took. The air smelled of expensive perfume and polished wood, a scent so different from the small cafes and diners she was used to. Her uniform felt tight and itchy, and she adjusted it nervously, reminding herself that she belonged there only for a short while. Tonight was a big event, a party thrown by one of the wealthiest men in the city, and she had been assigned to serve drinks and hors d'oeuvres. It was just another shift for her. But tonight something in the atmosphere made her feel both small and strange, like a character in a story she had never been part of. She moved among the guests, offering trays of champagne and sparkling water, keeping her head down as she passed laughter and chatter that seemed so foreign. People were dressed in gowns and tuxedos, their voices full of confidence and ease. She overheard snippets of conversation about business deals, exotic vacations, and expensive watches. She wondered how many of them even noticed her moving silently among them, or if she was invisible like she often felt at other places. But she told herself to focus on her job, to be professional and not get lost in the wonder of the room. A soft piano melody floated through the hall from the far corner. It was played by a live musician, adding to the elegance of the evening. She paused for a moment, listening as her fingers itched to reach out and play. Music had always been her escape, the one thing that felt entirely hers. When she was alone, she would play the small piano in her apartment for hours, losing herself in the notes. But in front of people like this, music was just noise, a thing for professionals and wealthy patrons. She reminded herself to stay in her role, to carry her tray and keep her steps quiet. As she moved closer to the crowd, a man in a sharp suit caught sight of her. He was tall and commanding, his eyes sharp and calculating. He smiled, but it was not a smile of warmth. It was the kind that made people uneasy, the kind that suggested he believed he had power over everyone around him. He watched her for a few moments before calling her over. Her heart raced as she approached, wondering what he wanted. He gestured toward the piano in the corner. "Can you play?" he asked, his voice smooth but slightly mocking. She hesitated, not sure what he meant. Did he think she was a musician? Did he really want her to play in front of all these people? She had never performed for an audience like this, and the thought made her stomach twist. She shook her head gently, trying to be polite. "No, sir. I don't perform for guests," she said. He raised an eyebrow and smiled, the kind that made her feel small and exposed. "Well, maybe you should. It would be entertaining." The words carried a challenge, and she sensed the hidden cruelty behind them. She realized he wanted to put her on display, to see her flounder where he thought she did not belong. The guests nearby had started to notice, some whispering and nudging each other, curiosity mixed with expectation in their eyes. She felt a tight knot form in her chest. Her mind raced, thinking about her options. She could refuse and risk looking rude in front of everyone, or she could go to the piano and try to survive the moment with dignity. She could almost hear the mocking thoughts of the man as he imagined her failing, and it made her cheeks burn. But deep inside, a tiny voice reminded her of the hours she had spent practicing alone, the long evenings where she had poured her heart into the keys of her old piano. She knew she could play, and she knew that music had a way of speaking louder than fear. She nodded slowly, trying to steady her voice. I can play," she admitted. The words felt heavy and risky, but once out, they carried a strange sense of relief. The man's smile widened, satisfied, thinking he had set her up for embarrassment. The nearby guests leaned in, sensing that something unusual was about to happen. Some had drinks in hand, some whispered to friends, but all eyes were now on her. She walked toward the piano, her steps careful but steady. The polished floor reflected her movements, making it feel as though she was gliding toward an invisible stage. The guests parted slightly, curious and eager to see what would happen. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, feeling the familiar texture and weight beneath her fingertips. The sound was warm and comforting, a reminder of the hours she had spent alone, learning to express herself through music. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath and letting the calmness wash over her. She opened her eyes, and the crowd seemed immense. Their faces were expectant, some smiling, some skeptical, and some openly mocking. She could feel the man's gaze, sharp and challenging, daring her to fail. Her hands hovered over the keys, her mind focusing on the music rather than the audience. She began with a simple melody, soft and gentle, letting the notes fill the air. Slowly, the murmurs of the crowd began to fade, replaced by the clarity of the piano. The first few notes were careful, cautious, like stepping into a river without knowing its depth. But soon, confidence began to grow. Her fingers moved with more freedom, guided by years of practice and passion. The music started to flow, weaving a story that had nothing to do with wealth or status, nothing to do with the man who wanted to humiliate her. It was her story, her voice, speaking through the piano. Some guests began to pause, their drinks forgotten in their hands, as the melody captured their attention. Eyes that had been filled with curiosity or judgment softened, and whispers turned into quiet awe. The man who had called her over frowned slightly, sensing that his plan was not unfolding as he expected. But the music did not falter. It grew stronger, more confident, as if fueled by the very doubt and challenge she faced. She remembered why she loved music. Because it gave her strength, it gave her a voice when words were not enough. Every note she played was a piece of herself, shared with a crowd that had only wanted to see her falter. But she was not faltering. She was rising. The sound of the piano filled the room, and for a few moments, the wealth and power of the guests seemed less important than the simple, undeniable beauty of music. The man's expression changed as he listened. The mockery in his eyes faded, replaced by a mixture of surprise and respect. He had underestimated her, thinking she was just a quiet waitress, someone to be humiliated for amusement. He had not counted on talent, on dedication, on the power of someone who believed in themselves despite the odds. The guests, too, were captivated. Some leaned forward, some closed their eyes, letting the music reach them. The room had transformed from a place of pretension to a space where music could speak for itself. She finished the piece softly, letting the final notes linger in the air. For a moment there was silence. Then the sound of applause began, growing steadily as people clapped for her skill and courage. The man who had tried to humiliate her could only manage a reluctant nod, acknowledging that he had been proven wrong. She felt her heart pound, not with fear, but with pride and relief. She had faced a moment meant to shame her and had turned it into a triumph. As she rose from the piano, the applause continued. Some guests came forward to compliment her, expressing genuine admiration. She smiled politely, thanking them. But inside she felt a glow that no words could capture. This was more than recognition. It was proof that talent, effort, and courage could break through even the most intimidating situations. The man watched, silent, no longer able to diminish her presence with words or gestures. She returned to her duties, carrying drinks again, but now she felt different. The room that had seemed so foreign now felt alive in a new way. She noticed details she hadn't before. The subtle glances of respect from other staff, the softened tone in the conversations of some guests. She had changed the energy of the evening simply by being true to herself and sharing her gift. The piano remained behind her, quiet now, but she knew it had been her ally, a tool that had allowed her to transform fear into expression. Throughout the night, she continued her work, but the memory of the performance stayed with her. Every time she passed the grand piano, she thought of the way the music had filled the room and changed the minds of those who had doubted her. She realized that while wealth and power could intimidate, they could not replace skill, passion, or courage. And in that moment, she felt something she had never felt at a party before. She felt seen, not for what she wore or her job, but for who she truly was. She wiped her hands on her apron, trying to steady her breathing as she moved through the crowd again. The earlier applause still echoed in her mind, but now a different feeling settled over her. There was a tension in the air, a sense that everyone was waiting for her next move. She knew the wealthy man who had called her to the piano was watching, his sharp gaze following her every step. Some of the guests whispered among themselves, curiosity and skepticism dancing in their eyes. She felt the weight of their attention, heavier than the tray of drinks she carried. He stepped forward, a confident smile on his face, and spoke loudly enough for a few nearby guests to hear. "You have talent, but can you handle a real challenge?" His tone was playful, but she could hear the edge beneath it, the subtle mockery meant to test her. The room seemed to quiet slightly, the soft murmur of conversation fading as people sensed that something more was about to unfold. She felt a shiver run down her spine, but she told herself to focus, to not let fear take over. She approached the piano once more, her hands brushing the keys lightly. Her mind wandered back to the evenings she had spent alone, practicing in her small apartment. The hours of repetition, the mistakes, the corrections, the joy of finally getting a piece right. All of it came rushing back. She had played in front of no one for years, hiding her talent because life had required her attention elsewhere. Now, here she was, in a grand room filled with strangers who might laugh at her or, she hoped, be amazed. The wealthy man leaned against the piano, watching her with a mixture of anticipation and amusement. He had made a game of this, thinking she would falter, and he expected a spectacle. She could feel the tension he projected, and it made her heart beat faster. But rather than letting it paralyze her, she let it sharpen her focus. She could feel the keys under her fingers, remember the melodies she had practiced countless times. The music was hers, and no one could take that away. She began with a simple piece, soft and tentative, easing herself into the performance. The notes were familiar, comforting, and she let them flow naturally. At first, a few guests exchanged curious glances, unsure of what to expect. But as she continued, the music grew richer, more confident, and the room seemed to lean in, drawn by the sound. She could feel her own confidence building with each note, a quiet strength forming inside her. The wealthy man frowned slightly, noticing that the reactions were not what he had hoped for. The laughter he had anticipated did not come. Instead, people were captivated, their attention fully on her. Some leaned closer to listen, their faces reflecting surprise and admiration. She noticed a few people whispering, impressed by the skill and emotion she poured into the music. It was as if the piano had become a bridge, connecting her to the audience in a way words never could. She moved into a more complex piece, her fingers flying over the keys with precision and grace. The melodies twisted and turned, rising and falling, carrying emotion in every note. She closed her eyes for a moment, losing herself in the music, letting it speak louder than any fear or doubt. The room seemed to change with her, the walls fading as the sound filled the space. Even the wealthy man, who had intended to humiliate her, appeared taken aback by the talent unfolding before him. Some guests could not contain their reactions. A few clapped quietly, impressed by the skill and emotion, while others simply watched, eyes wide, unable to believe what they were hearing. She had transformed a moment meant for mockery into a display of artistry. Each note was a declaration of her dedication, her passion, and her ability to rise above the expectations of those who underestimated her. The piano became her voice, telling a story that no one had anticipated. She remembered her own journey, the times she had doubted herself, the moments when she thought her talent would remain hidden forever. But here, in front of strangers and skeptics, she was proving to herself that she could face a challenge and shine. The nervousness she had felt earlier began to transform into exhilaration, the kind that comes from discovering that fear can be a companion rather than an enemy. Her heart raced, not with anxiety, but with the joy of expressing herself fully. The wealthy man tried to intervene, suggesting a faster piece, a more difficult challenge, hoping to trip her up. But she welcomed it, her fingers responding with skill and confidence. Each key she pressed became a statement, a reminder that her talent was not dependent on approval or social status. The room seemed to hold its breath as she played, the music capturing attention and silencing doubt. Guests who had expected entertainment at someone else's expense were now witnesses to a quiet triumph, an authentic display of skill and heart. She felt a wave of connection with the audience, sensing their admiration and surprise. The whispers of doubt were replaced by murmurs of respect. Even the staff, who had been watching from the sidelines, exchanged glances of amazement. She realized that the music had created a space where class and expectation no longer mattered, where everyone present could appreciate something beautiful without pretense. Her heart swelled with pride and humility at the same time, grateful for the opportunity to share her gift, even in the face of intended humiliation. As the piece came to an end, she held the final note, letting it linger, and slowly lifted her hands from the keys. Silence followed, thick and heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was a silence filled with acknowledgement, a pause before the applause that was sure to come. She opened her eyes and looked around, seeing faces transformed by the experience, their expressions a mix of awe and respect. The wealthy man's confident smile was gone, replaced by a more thoughtful look, as if he were realizing that he had misjudged her. The first claps began softly, tentative, as people expressed their amazement. Then the applause grew, filling the room with warmth and appreciation. Guests stood, some clapping loudly, others nodding in admiration. She felt a strange sense of calm amidst the excitement, proud that she had faced the challenge and succeeded on her own terms. The piano had been her ally, guiding her through the moment, and she had trusted herself to let it lead the way. The wealthy man approached her afterward, his expression a mixture of respect and surprise. He extended a hand, offering a compliment that felt sincere, even if slightly awkward. "I underestimated you," he said, and she nodded politely, accepting the words without ego. She had already proven to herself what mattered, that her talent, dedication, and courage could speak louder than any intention to humiliate. The recognition from others was a bonus, but it was the personal triumph that filled her with satisfaction. As she returned to her duties, the room still buzzing from the performance, she carried herself differently. There was a newfound confidence in her steps, a quiet pride that came from facing fear and turning it into something beautiful. Guests continued to approach her, expressing admiration and curiosity, and she responded with polite smiles, grateful for the acknowledgement but more focused on the knowledge that she had stayed true to herself. The party continued around her, but for that moment, she had created a space where authenticity, talent, and courage were celebrated. Throughout the rest of the evening, she moved among the guests with a lighter step. The earlier tension that had gripped her chest was gone, replaced by a sense of calm and control. She noticed how the wealthy man now interacted differently with her, no longer attempting to assert dominance, but offering a nod of respect when their eyes met. The guests, too, seemed to regard her differently, some approaching with genuine interest, others whispering to one another about the unexpected brilliance of the performance. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the countless hours of practice and the quiet determination to keep her talent alive despite the demands of life. She realized that moments of fear and challenge were often the same moments that revealed strength and potential. The experience at the piano had reminded her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. And in that realization, she found a quiet sense of power, the kind that could not be taken away by wealth, status, or intention to humiliate. As the night drew on, she continued to serve with grace and poise, carrying trays and engaging politely with guests. But inside, she felt a lasting change. She had faced a test meant to diminish her, and instead, she had shone. The applause, the admiration, and even the acknowledgement from the wealthy man were evidence of her triumph. But more importantly, she carried within herself the knowledge that she could rise above expectations and challenges. That knowledge, she understood, was priceless, and it would stay with her long after the party ended. She sat at the grand piano, her fingers hovering over the keys as she took a deep breath. The room was quiet now, every eye on her, and the weight of their attention pressed down like a heavy curtain. She could feel the eyes of the wealthy man on her, sharp and expectant, and she knew he was waiting for her to falter. But instead of fear, she felt a strange calm. The music inside her was ready to speak, and she allowed it to flow through her. She began with a soft, gentle melody, each note careful and precise. At first, it was simple, almost hesitant, but gradually it grew in strength and clarity. The audience leaned in, drawn by the sound, their whispers fading until only the music remained. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the notes carry her away, letting them speak in a language that no one could mock or challenge. Her fingers moved with increasing confidence, dancing over the keys with a grace that came from years of practice. She remembered the nights spent alone in her apartment, playing in silence, lost in the joy of music. Every note she played now was a reflection of that dedication, a testament to her love for something pure and beautiful. She felt her heart swell as the music filled the grand hall, reaching corners she had never imagined could be touched. The wealthy man's expression shifted as he watched her. His eyes, once filled with a smug confidence, now held surprise. He had intended this to be a moment of mockery, but instead, he was witnessing something extraordinary. The melody rose and fell, weaving a story of emotion and skill, a tale of quiet determination that no one had expected. The room seemed to breathe with her, every listener caught in the spell of the performance. Some guests could not contain themselves. A few clapped quietly, moved by the beauty of the music, while others simply watched, wide-eyed, unable to believe the talent that was unfolding before them. She had turned a moment meant for humiliation into a display of artistry. Each note was more than sound. It was courage, it was passion, it was the triumph of effort over expectation. The piano had become her voice, and through it, she spoke without fear. As the piece grew more complex, she let her emotions guide her fingers. The melody twisted and turned, rising to dramatic peaks and falling into soft valleys, capturing the attention of everyone in the room. She felt a connection with the audience, even without seeing their faces, sensing their admiration and surprise. The music had created a bridge between her world and theirs, a place where skill and emotion mattered more than wealth or status. The wealthy man tried to maintain his composure, but the change in the atmosphere was undeniable. His plan to humiliate her had failed, and instead, he watched with an unspoken acknowledgement of her talent. The audience responded, their applause growing louder, some standing, some nodding in amazement. She smiled faintly to herself, feeling the power of the moment, the realization that she could rise above intimidation and shine on her own terms. She shifted into an even more demanding piece, her fingers flying with precision and confidence. The notes flowed effortlessly, each one carrying a story, a memory, a piece of herself. She felt the music shaping the room, transforming it from a space of social pretension into a sanctuary of genuine expression. Guests who had come expecting amusement at another's expense were now witnesses to a quiet miracle, the beauty of talent and determination displayed openly. Her heart raced with exhilaration, not fear, as she played. Every challenge the wealthy man had hoped to present was met with skill and emotion, turning his intentions into a showcase of her abilities. The audience responded, their expressions softening, their whispers turning into murmurs of respect. Even the staff, who had been watching quietly, exchanged glances of amazement. She realized that she had changed the energy of the room, not through confrontation or words, but through the simple power of music. The melody reached its climax, a crescendo that filled the hall and held the audience in suspense. She poured herself into the performance, letting every emotion, every experience, every hour of practice manifest in sound. The music was no longer just notes. It was an expression of resilience, of courage, of the triumph of dedication over expectation. She felt a surge of pride and joy, knowing that she was no longer just a waitress in a grand room. She was a musician, a storyteller, and the audience could feel it. As the piece drew to a close, she played the final notes with a gentle precision, letting them linger in the air like a breath held in awe. Silence followed, deep and profound, a pause filled with acknowledgement and admiration. She opened her eyes and looked around, seeing faces transformed by the performance. The wealthy man's confident smile had vanished, replaced by a thoughtful expression, an unspoken admission of respect. The first applause broke the silence, soft at first, then growing steadily as the audience responded to the beauty and skill they had witnessed. Some guests stood, clapping loudly, others simply nodded, their eyes wide with amazement. She felt a strange sense of calm amidst the excitement, a pride that was quiet but deeply satisfying. The moment belonged to her, and she had claimed it with grace and courage. The wealthy man approached afterward, his expression a mix of surprise and respect. He extended a hand, offering a compliment that, though slightly awkward, felt genuine. "I did not expect this," he admitted. She nodded politely, accepting the words without ego, knowing that the real triumph had already been hers. The recognition of others was secondary to the personal victory she had experienced in facing fear and turning it into expression. She returned to her duties, carrying drinks and moving through the room with a new confidence. The atmosphere had shifted. The audience now regarded her with admiration, some approaching to express their appreciation. She responded with polite smiles, feeling the satisfaction of accomplishment without arrogance. The piano remained behind her, silent now, but its impact lingered, a reminder of the power of talent and courage. As the night continued, she moved among the guests with a lighter step, the earlier tension replaced by a quiet assurance. She noticed subtle changes in the room. Respectful glances from other staff, softened expressions from the wealthy man, and genuine interest from the guests. The performance had not only showcased her skill, but had transformed perceptions, turning doubt into admiration and skepticism into respect. She reflected on her journey, the hours of practice, the moments of doubt, and the courage it took to face an audience that had expected her to fail. She realized that fear and challenge often revealed the strength she had not known she possessed. The piano had been her voice, and through it, she had expressed herself fully, without apology. This realization filled her with a lasting sense of empowerment, a knowledge that would carry her through future challenges. Throughout the evening, she continued her work, serving guests with grace and poise, but always with the quiet confidence that had grown within her. The applause and admiration lingered in her mind, not as a need for validation, but as a reminder of what she could achieve when she trusted herself. She had faced a moment intended to humiliate her, and had transformed it into a showcase of talent, courage, and authenticity. That knowledge, she understood, was more valuable than any recognition, more powerful than any social expectation, and it would stay with her forever. The applause had barely faded when she returned to her duties, but the atmosphere in the room had changed entirely. Guests who had been chatting casually now paused to watch her move among them, noticing the confidence in her steps and the calm in her expression. Some whispered to each other, clearly impressed by the talent they had just witnessed. The wealthy man, who had initially planned to humiliate her, stood quietly near the piano, his posture slightly less rigid, a trace of respect on his face. She noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor but kept her focus on her work, not seeking praise or confrontation. As she carried trays of drinks, a few guests approached her to compliment her performance. Their words were sincere and kind, expressing admiration for her skill and the emotion she had brought to the music. She thanked them politely, feeling warmth spread through her chest. Each compliment was a reminder that she had turned a moment of fear into one of triumph. It was not about being noticed by everyone, but about being acknowledged for something she had worked tirelessly to master. She realized that her music had the power to change perceptions, to create respect where there had been doubt. The wealthy man finally approached, his expression a mix of surprise and humility. He extended his hand, offering a compliment that carried a weight of sincerity. "I didn't expect that. You truly have an incredible talent," he said. She nodded politely, accepting the words without ego. In that moment, she felt a quiet satisfaction. The validation was not the goal. The goal had been to face the challenge and remain true to herself, and she had done just that. Some guests who had initially laughed or whispered now looked on with admiration. A few asked questions about her training, expressing genuine curiosity about how someone with her background could possess such skill. She answered briefly, keeping her humility, but inside she felt a growing sense of pride. It was not arrogance but recognition that hard work and dedication had a value that could not be diminished by wealth or social status. As the evening progressed, she continued to serve, moving gracefully among the guests. But she was no longer just a waitress in the crowd. She had become someone who commanded respect without demanding it. The small interactions she had with guests now carried a different energy, a subtle acknowledgement that she was not merely part of the service staff but a person with talent, courage, and determination. Even the staff she worked alongside seemed to view her differently, their glances filled with admiration rather than indifference. She thought about the wealthy man's initial intention, the plan to humiliate her in front of everyone. Instead of letting it break her, she had transformed it into an opportunity to showcase her skills and to assert her dignity. The experience reinforced something she had long known, that challenges and fear were often the very situations that revealed strength and potential. She realized that she had gained not just respect from others but a deeper understanding of her own abilities and resilience. The wealthy man, observing her now, appeared to be reflecting on his actions. His earlier arrogance had been replaced with a thoughtful acknowledgement of her talent. She could see that he had learned something about underestimating others, and perhaps even about the limitations of wealth and status as measures of worth. Though he did not voice these thoughts aloud, his behavior had changed, showing that respect and recognition could emerge even in those who had initially sought to diminish her. A few of the guests approached her with more personal compliments, expressing how moved they had been by the music. Some spoke of the emotion and passion they felt, how her performance had touched them in ways they had not anticipated. She listened, feeling grateful for their words, but also quietly aware that the real impact was the realization she carried within herself. The music had allowed her to communicate beyond words, to share something pure and personal, and the response from the audience confirmed its power. She returned to the piano later in the evening, not to perform again, but to touch the keys lightly, savoring the memory of the moment. The instrument had been her companion, guiding her through a difficult challenge and allowing her to express herself fully. She felt a deep connection to it, a sense of gratitude for the way it had helped her navigate fear and transform it into beauty. The wealthy man watched from a distance, no longer attempting to control the situation, but observing with quiet respect as she interacted with the piano and the guests. Throughout the rest of the party, she continued her work with calm assurance. Guests who had initially doubted her now treated her with a new level of respect, their interactions warmer and more genuine. The atmosphere around her shifted subtly, no longer one of judgment or mockery, but of acknowledgement and appreciation. She noticed small gestures of kindness and recognition from other staff members, a reminder that courage and talent could inspire admiration even among those who had previously overlooked her. As the night drew to a close, she reflected on the events that had unfolded. The wealthy man's attempt to humiliate her had instead provided an opportunity to showcase her skill and inner strength. The experience had reinforced her belief in the value of hard work, dedication, and courage in the face of fear. She realized that true respect was earned through authenticity and the willingness to confront challenges, rather than through social status or wealth. The final moments of the party were filled with quiet conversation and farewells. Guests complimented her once more, expressing their appreciation for her presence and her music. She smiled politely, feeling a sense of fulfillment that went beyond the immediate recognition. The evening had changed her in subtle but significant ways, affirming her abilities and strengthening her confidence. She knew that the lessons learned tonight would stay with her, guiding her in future endeavors and interactions. She left the party with a sense of quiet triumph. The experience had been more than a test of talent. It had been a test of character, resilience, and self-belief. She had faced a moment designed to undermine her, and instead, she had emerged stronger, more confident, and fully aware of her own worth. The memory of the music, the applause, and the subtle transformations in those around her would remain with her, a reminder of what could be achieved when courage and authenticity meet opportunity. Walking home, she thought about the wealthy man, the guests, and the piano. She realized that each of them had played a part in a story that had turned unexpectedly, that the night had become a testament to the power of talent and integrity. She smiled to herself, knowing that her journey was far from over, but feeling assured that she had faced one of her greatest challenges and emerged victorious. The respect she had earned, both from others and from herself, was a lasting reward that no wealth or status could diminish. The days after the party felt surreal to her. Life seemed to go back to its usual rhythm, but the memory of that night lingered, like a warm light she could carry with her. People she served at work noticed a change in her demeanor, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. Some co-workers asked about the performance, their curiosity tinged with admiration, and she told them briefly, smiling at the recollection of the moment when music had spoken louder than fear. The wealthy man had not forgotten her performance either. A week later, she received a small envelope with an invitation to another gathering, a private event this time, where she was asked to play again. It was not an order or a demand, but an opportunity, and she recognized the respect behind it. She felt a mixture of nerves and excitement, remembering how the first challenge had transformed her, and she knew that this time, she could face it with even more confidence. As she prepared for the event, she practiced diligently, not to prove anyone wrong, but to honor herself and the gift she had cultivated. Each note, each chord, became a reminder of the courage she had found and the joy she felt in expressing herself through music. She understood that talent alone was not enough. The bravery to show it in the face of doubt was what truly made a difference. Her hands moved over the keys with familiarity and ease, and she felt a deep connection to the music that had always been part of her life. When the day of the private event arrived, she stepped into the room with her head held high. The guests were fewer, more focused, and she noticed that they were already aware of her talent. There was no expectation of mockery this time, only anticipation. She approached the piano, feeling the weight of the past performance behind her, but also the confidence it had instilled. Her fingers touched the keys lightly, and she let the music flow naturally, without hesitation, without fear. The melody rose and filled the room, rich and expressive, capturing the attention of everyone present. She played with a freedom she had never known in public before, letting her emotions guide her fingers. Each note told a story, each pause a reflection of the journey she had taken. The wealthy man watched quietly, a faint smile on his face, no longer the person who sought to embarrass her. She felt the respect emanating from him, an acknowledgement that transcended words. Guests reacted with genuine admiration, some leaning in to listen more closely, others closing their eyes, letting the music touch them deeply. She realized that her talent had become a bridge, connecting her to people in ways that conversation alone could not achieve. Music had a power that transcended social barriers, and she felt honored to be the one to share it. The room became a sanctuary, a space where status and expectation fell away, leaving only the beauty of sound and the sincerity of expression. After the performance, several guests approached her to express their appreciation. They spoke of the emotion and passion she conveyed, how her music had moved them in ways they had not anticipated. She thanked them, feeling gratitude for their recognition, but also pride in herself for trusting her own abilities. The experience reinforced the lesson she had learned, that facing fear and remaining true to oneself could turn even challenging situations into opportunities for growth and connection. The wealthy man himself approached her afterward, this time with a calm and sincere demeanor. He acknowledged her skill, not with arrogance or superiority, but with respect. "Your music is extraordinary," he said, and she nodded, accepting his words gracefully. She understood that the true value of the moment was not in seeking validation, but in recognizing her own strength and the impact she could have on others through her talent. In the following weeks, she noticed small changes in her life. More people seemed willing to listen when she spoke, to value her opinions, and to treat her with respect. She felt a sense of empowerment that was not tied to wealth or status but came from her own accomplishments and self-belief. Opportunities began to appear. Invitations to play at small events, requests from friends and acquaintances to share her music, and encouragement from those who had witnessed her performances. Each opportunity was a chance to continue building on the courage and confidence she had discovered. She reflected often on the contrast between the first party and her life before it. The wealthy man's attempt to humiliate her had inadvertently opened a door to experiences she had never imagined. She realized that challenges, no matter how intimidating, carried potential for growth and recognition. Facing fear and stepping into the unknown had revealed a strength within her that she could carry forward in all areas of her life. Her family and close friends noticed the change as well. She spoke with more assurance, moved with more confidence, and smiled with a calm pride that had been absent before. They celebrated her achievements with her, recognizing the perseverance and dedication behind each note she had played. She shared stories of the events with laughter and reflection, not dwelling on the fear, but on the triumph and joy that had followed. Over time, she continued to nurture her talent, practicing diligently and seeking opportunities to perform. Each performance reinforced her belief in herself, and each challenge she faced was met with a quiet confidence born from the first night when she had turned fear into expression. She understood that her music was more than a skill. It was a means of connection, of sharing emotion and creating understanding where words might fail. Looking back on the journey, she felt grateful for the unlikely circumstances that had pushed her to step into the spotlight. What had begun as an attempt at humiliation had become a defining moment in her life, teaching her that courage, talent, and authenticity could overcome doubt and expectation. She carried the lessons with her always, knowing that the strength she had discovered would continue to guide her in every step she took. The piano remained her companion, a source of comfort, expression, and power. She played not for recognition, but because it was a part of who she was, a reflection of her dedication, and a way to connect with others on a profound level. Her performances became opportunities to share a piece of herself, to inspire and move those who listened. She had discovered that music could transform moments, hearts, and perceptions, and she embraced that gift with humility and pride. The wealthy man and others who had once doubted her no longer saw her as just a waitress. They recognized her talent, her courage, and her ability to rise above expectation. Their respect, once uncertain, had become genuine, a testament to her perseverance and authenticity. She knew that true respect was earned, not given, and that it could only come from demonstrating skill, character, and integrity. As her journey continued, she remained grounded, aware that every opportunity was a chance to grow, and every performance a way to share something meaningful. She cherished the experiences, both the challenge and the triumph, understanding that each step had shaped her into the confident and talented individual she had become. The lessons of courage, authenticity, and self-belief stayed with her, guiding her through life's challenges and reminding her that even the most difficult situations could be transformed into moments of greatness. In the end, she realized that the true reward was not in the applause or recognition, but in the knowledge that she had faced fear, embraced her talent, and shared it with the world. She had turned what could have been a moment of humiliation into a lifelong lesson in courage, strength, and the power of staying true to oneself. And as she continued to play, each note carried that story, a reminder that talent, dedication, and heart could triumph over doubt, expectation, and fear, creating moments of beauty and inspiration that would linger long after the music ended.